Welcome back, you two-wheeled knuckleheads. This is your host, Johnny Hopper. And yes, my eyes look like I've been smoking weed, but it's actually, I need a sweatband because I just was doing one of my last rides that Coach has got me doing. And I'm going to be drinking some of his energy fuel here. It's almost empty because got a lot of that going on here, but I digress. We've got some great guests, or a great guest on the show today, Trevor Knight from the Motocross Network. I almost thought his voice wasn't real, like he was using some sort of Batman thing because it just seemed too deep. It seemed too much like Gypsy Tales, but no, he's in the show. You'll hear it from himself. That's actually his real voice. So how the heck are you doing, Trevor? I know that was kind of a crappy intro, but
no, it's good, man. Yeah, I'm doing good. Busy. You know how it is. I got a lot of projects going on.
Heck yeah. Well, dude, I enjoy your content. You do a good job with it. It's just straightforward, short and sweet. And like I said, you got a voice for radio, and you're handsome too. So that's why we have you here on the
at least
web
there's
show.
Some positive things on the internet. There's a lot of bad people out there that said some bad things, but hey, whatever.
Oh, dude, you just go to Vital and search my name. It gets rough. When I really want to feel shitty about myself, I just go to Vital.
You know what, Johnny? It's funny you say that. Like, I can honestly say I've never gone to that website. I've heard a lot about the forums and stuff. Is it as malicious as they say?
Dude, but here's the thing, like it's almost any topic. Like it doesn't matter what's most of the stuff that's on there. People like to bitch about stuff, right?
Gotcha.
And I guess I've been guilty of bitching about lots of stuff too.
Okay.
So, and you guys can see we've got Coach. Coach is the man. He has raised my VO2 max from the 50s to 58. So give it up for Coach. He knows his shit. He survived a heart attack. I mean, I think you're unbeatable, Coach.
No, I don't know about that, brother. As I always say, and we said it even in the last show, you're the one putting in the sweat equity. I just appreciate the confidence in the process and the system. And I just really enjoy it because I'm at a point in my career now where we can sift through the people that like to make excuses. And I always find it interesting, when you look at, like, I've worked with some clients for 10, 15 years, and they're like, they realize the good athletes. I always go so far as even to say the real athletes, the ones that realize that as you develop as an athlete, it's like an onion. You just keep peeling back the next layer of challenges. Physiology never is a one and done. So when I hear a parent, particularly moto parents, they're like, yeah, we've got it figured out, man. We know what you're talking about now. We got this. And I'm like, oof, not that I want. And if anybody's ever worked with me, last thing I ever want is anybody to be dependent on me. My big thing is I'm always trying to educate and then take the collected data, run it through the knowledge. And then that way you have a little bit more knowledge of how you're creating incremental improvements. I don't ever want anybody to be dependent on me. But when I hear a moto parent's like, yeah, we figured it out, we've heard it before, I'm like, man. And I'm going to sound like a real jerk here in today's show, but I always find it interesting when you work with an athlete for a while and you see their trajectory go up, 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 and then they think they know it all and they go out on their own and like they fall literally out of the top 10 or 15 consistently. And you're just like, now I'm not trying to take credit for it. What I'm saying is, if you think that you can outfox physiology, it's kind of like saying you can outfox gravity. There's certain principles that have to be adhered to. And when you start to deviate from them, you're going to lose VO2 max. You're going to lose strength to weight ratios. You're going to lose that top end speed. And I go and I watched like Ponca last week, and I had to laugh out loud in my office because there's people that we used to work with that are on struggle bus. And I'm like, I don't gloat in it. In fact, I find it a tad bit sad because I'm like, had they just stayed the course, and then you see guys that you work with for years that have never had an injury. And now all of a sudden they've had 3 in 1 year because they've changed programs and gone to a high volume, low calorie intake, just, balls to the wall, everything's WFO. And yet we've educated them that is a dead end street, and they still choose to go down there because, the local pro at the facility, or, a friend of a friend of a friend. And I'm just, there's a couple pros that announced this week that they're actually becoming coaches now. And I'm like, God help us, because I don't care if you've been in a factory rig or not, does not make you a physiologist or a nutritionalist, no more than me reading my 250F manual makes me a professional mechanic, So,
Yeah, I can definitely say a riding coach for sure.
oh, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. But I don't know. I think these ex-professionals need to stay in their lane and just be riding coaches. But what happens is a lot of them, they want to if they see money sitting in the peripheral, they think that they've got to gobble it up. And I could give you some really horror stories of some top pros that I thought we were networking with, only to have them come around and literally they told my clients to fire me to only work with them. And yet I had hired them as a riding coach to do some camps together. So it's a pretty interesting environment, needless to say. But going back to yourself, hey, all I can do is build a framework, help you understand how to interpret the results and make sure that you're on the incremental improvement path. And you're the one that's driven that VO2 max up, not me, brother. I can't take credit.
I guess this is for for the whole panel here. I'm super bummed that I didn't find somebody like you when I was really trying hard. Even the days of the one cycle that I did, like I would have been way more effective. Because kind of putting in the work is the easy part, but it's actually having a good plan that is going to work is the hard part. Because we've talked about it a bunch. It's like the dang phone charger. If this thing's at 100% and you keep wearing it down and you only let it charge like for half an hour every night, it's never going to be a 100. It's going to be 80, then 70, then 60, then 50. Then you end up showing up at the races and you really should be sleeping. And I think that's what everyone gets wrong, is they don't know when to recover. And like sleeping is super important and eating is incredibly important. And people just think it's pretty much the time spent riding the motorcycle is really the thing that's all important, but that's only kind of half the battle. But Trevor, do you think that what Coach was saying is possibly the reason as to why we've seen riders like Stewart and Webb and Sexton all kind of move from Alden Baker, and then somewhat, it's a loaded question because they have been successful without him, but then also we've also kind of seen them crumble as well.
There's a lot of riders that have moved away from the more strict training programs, and I think for some riders it's going to benefit them. But then I don't like Ferrandis. You heard about Ferrandis and Villeman. I don't know exactly what happened to them, but I heard that Villeman was pretty tough on him, and you know how Villeman is. He's very aggressive in how he speaks to his riders, and he's straight up with them. He doesn't make up anything, and I don't think Ferrandis like that. And
that's the French culture, though.
Yeah, and ever since Ferrandis left him, he's been kind of, it might have been just a bike. He obviously didn't like the bike this year, but ever since he left him, it's been kind of a struggle bus for him. And I think Sexton dealt with it pretty good, but yeah, it works for some riders, other riders it doesn't.
Coach, well, we talked about this actually in last week's show. The ironic part, Trevor, when you look at the bigger picture, if you think about the tail of the snake following the head of the snake, if you go back to Cooper Webb paying a lot of money to be on a program, gets run into the ground and says, you know what, I'm tired of being tired and I'm tired of paying money for it. So they separate themselves for the program. Well, then the next year they kind of recharge their batteries. They come back. And then what ends up happening is they're told that they've got to go back to the previous program. It's kind of like a president that kind of absorbs the benefit of the first president. Like when a president comes in and cuts corporate taxes, and then 6 years later, the corporate tax influx into the government is at a high, and the current president says, look at all the money I'm bringing in, when he had nothing to do with it. That's what I heard a lot of frustration with guys who have left expensive programs. They're like, look, I'm tired of paying the money. I'm going to go out and get myself recharged. They back away from the overtraining and the calorie restricted diets. And then they come back doing better. At the same time, they're told they've got to go back to a program because those contracts underneath that umbrella got changed around where you have to use that program. Well, then the person that took the time off and got themselves rejuvenated, the person that they went back to got the credit for the fact that the rider got away from the program and rejuvenated themselves. Yeah. So I've talked to a couple of riders and they get very frustrated because the saying is the program always gets credit for the work that I've done, I being the professional racer, right? So it's like the racer gets tired of paying the money. He goes and gets his batteries recharged. The program gets credit for it the next year. And you're like, oh, see, when you weren't with them, you lost. And then when you rebuilt yourself, it was because you came back to the program. And they're like, they feel like they can't win for losing because everybody else gets credit for the work that the riders made and the decisions. Yeah. Levi Kitchen's a perfect example. If you guys read what he said, He wants to do
Mhm.
both on and off the bike on his own terms versus being under the thumb. And I think there's a lot more to it. I think he doesn't, and Johnny, you alluded to this last time. I think not many people at the goat farm are getting much attention except for Hayden. I think that's kind of understood, you know?
I've heard that directly from a guy who's training there. I don't know if you're familiar with Logan Best. He's an upcoming amateur guy.
Yep.
But I know him pretty well. And I spoke with him at Ironman about the scenario there. And he said he loves it, but it sucks for a lot of guys because, like you said, there's only attention on one or two guys. The rest of the guys kind of get treated, not poorly, but they're put on the back burner, which kind of sucks for those guys. So,
yeah.
But you could use it as fuel too, because that's I made a quick little reaction video this morning about the whole Lopes thing, because that's kind of where Lopes is at Club MX. He was the shit. He was the top tier guy that they were, him and Marchbanks, I would say, is pretty close. But if you had to pick one, I would say Lopes is probably the guy. But now he's moving to Star, where there's a bunch of guys. I mean, what is that team, like 6 riders now?
there's too many guys in that.
Yeah. You're going to be kind of left in the burner, but you could use it as fuel to want to take the attention off of other riders so that you get more resources. I don't even know how they're paying all the guys, to be honest.
Well, from what I've heard, I'm not going to say a majority of them, but a lion's share of them are not getting paid. It's bonuses only. But it goes back to that idea. Are you willing to risk a bonus program on a star bike? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think the answer would be overwhelmingly, if not 100% yes. But we saw this year, as many races, a bike other than a Star Yamaha got the whole shot. That's the first time we've seen that in almost 3 years. So if you're willing to race for,
match the Star power,
well, we know
pretty well.
Well, we know that there's a trademark on the Star motor, and it actually is up this year. So it'll be very interesting to see what next year looks like.
Do you think that even is enforceable?
Sure.
If you have, I mean, you don't think like any other, if I'm speculating, you don't think that any other team would be like, if we get torn down, they'll find some stuff but it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. I mean, do you really think they would go that far?
What do you mean, Johnny? Go that far to have something under the hood that nobody's aware of?
Well, to just kind of copy the Star bike and just roll the dice like nobody's going to catch it. Almost like put 350 stickers on a 250 and go out there and ride, Well,
you said the patent is up, right?
Yes, this year the patent is up. They've had a 3-year patent.
Okay, so
well, if the patent's up, then I don't see why they can't do it. And if they're copying them, well, who cares? A lot of companies copy other companies.
Well, it's just interesting if you look at 3 years ago,
plagiarism.
when you look at 3 years ago, when Jeremy Martin was riding the wheels, or maybe it was even longer than that now, when Jeremy was riding the wheels off that Geico Honda, trying to keep up with Jay Coop, and you could just see the differential in that horsepower game, and everybody wanted. I mean, you take a picture of the first turn, and it was nothing but blue bikes. And then you've just seen that morph gradually this year. You're seeing more and more PC bikes up there. Obviously, Hunter and Jet, on the 250 class when Jet was still in it, was putting the bike up there pretty consistently. Johnny, you bring up a good point, and Trevor, I'd be curious on your opinion on this. I'm hearing some people say that Shimoda is going to be disappointed going to the Honda, and they say that Hunter and Jet just kind of rode the wheels off that 250. I personally disagree. I think that Honda power plant, I think they've got a good foundation there. What do you think?
I'll let you answer, Trevor.
Honestly, I don't think Shimoda's going to do any better than he already is. I think he's kind of peaked. He just needs to stop crashing and making mistakes. I think Shimoda's a championship contender, obviously, but I think at PC, he's kind of reached his max. He's probably going to do just as good at Honda. It's just a money opportunity for him. He's going to make more money there obviously he's probably going to get Red Bull or Monster helmet sponsor. He can get a lot more sponsors there than he could at PC. It's a lot more strict there. So it's good money for him, but I don't think he's going to do any better necessarily.
But I mean, he was winning. So you're saying he's going to continue to win.
Yeah. I think he's not going to be dominant. He's going to be winning, but he's not going to be dominant. I don't think. Like some people are expecting him to pull a Jet or a Hunter. And I don't think so at all.
All right. I think that is fair. Truthfully, I think he's got just as good of a chance of winning a championship as Deegan does this year. I think he can be a little bit more consistent than Deegan. I don't think he can be as fast as Deegan, but we'll see what coast they decide to race.
Yeah, he can definitely be consistent. I just don't know if he has that raw speed that Deegan has. Deegan can dig places that most riders can't even think about digging. So I don't know.
Well, and we saw Shimoda give him a good elbow. So maybe if we see a little bit more of that spark from Joe,
Yeah.
I think that would be a game changer as well. Because I mean, every talking pundit said Joe needs to get a little bit meaner, right? Get a little bit more aggressive. And then the finale, we finally saw it. So maybe that is
for a while he's been riding like Kenny, because Kenny for the longest time did not want to bump elbows with anybody.
Yeah.
And people would kind of take advantage of that. And Deegan comes in and he doesn't care if it's practice, qualifying, even if it's its own teammate, he's going to bump, even if you're faster than him, he's going to take the shot, which is great for racing, great for TV. Ethically, sometimes, I'm on the fence of it, but at the same time, like there was a time when I effing hated Conor McGregor because I was like, you don't act this way. You just don't act this way. But he acted so inappropriately, but he did it so consistently and with such like charisma that you couldn't help but just take your hats off and then kind of fall in love with the guy. So that's the Deegan effect. Igor, you the man, brother. You the man.
Thank you, Igor. What I'm hoping that we'll see starting to come into fruition, I'd love to see underneath the star tent. I'd like to start seeing what we saw with Team Honda when you had Stanton and Bale underneath the same umbrella. You could cut the tension underneath there. Kudrowski with Larocco at Cowie, where, they don't talk to each other. They coexist. It seems like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like the teams have gone out of their way to make sure that environment doesn't get created. But I don't know, when you go back to the glory days when Honda had, Ricky Johnson and I don't know, you had the bad boy club and he was the guy on the way up and creating some friction in there, but they had the best bike. And now, I mean, let's just assume that Star continues to have a pretty solid foundation, but how much fun would it be to see how much of that internal fighting, like you said, if you looked at the way that Deegan kind of raced his own teammate there, it kind of brought back the Jean-Michel Bell days with Stanton. Like, I just hate you both on and off the track, and you have somebody like an Arnold that's saying, hey, we got to keep these boys separated so they don't beat each other up. And then of course you have Kudrowski, ghost riding his bike into Larocco after the finish line. And how much fun would it be to have that kind of internal fight going on both underneath the awning and in the grid?
Yeah, I definitely think if Shimoda wants to be faster than Deegan, he definitely has to step up the aggression level because he has been the nice guy for too long. So Deegan, obviously, like you said, very aggressive. It's part of his character. It's part of his personality. If Shimoda wants to get up to his speed, which he can be, he just doesn't have the aggressiveness. He's just got to get there. He's got to bump shoulders, bump bars, push people out of the way.
Yep, I totally agree. If we can get the aggression up where it's not a Matasevich Bradshaw type thing, that would be cool. Because that was just kind of like, bowling ball pin, get up, bowling ball pin, get up, versus just really dicing back and forth like a Wardy versus an O'Mara versus that whole, time frame where it was just on any given weekend, you could have literally 5 different guys win. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Trevor, I haven't really gotten your opinion though on Enzo kind of sticking it to club by signing a contract, then moving over. Like, what is your honest take on the whole scenario?
I mean, besides all the other drama, I don't see the problem with it. I mean, yeah, they've worked with him for a while and he's done good with them. They obviously they've worked together really good, but I don't know. I think honestly, anybody who gets handed a factory ride opportunity, why not take it? So in his perspective, he wants to be a top guy. Why not go with the top team? So that's my position on that, is just like, if you get an offer from Star Yamaha, I don't think anybody's going to turn it down, especially if you're on a satellite team. So,
Coach, do you guys feel like he burnt a bridge? As like, this is I don't even know what the contract looks like. I'd have to ask around, but let's just assume it's a 1-year deal, right? So all the pressure is on, and we know Enzo has been notorious for kind of putting it on the ground, being fast. Like at World Supercross, he dislocated his shoulder. Yeah, he finished 3rd, but like he's constantly throughout his whole career with the JGR Suzuki to the Phoenix Honda, like it's pretty typical for him to be somewhat injured. Do you think that he's going to want to go back to club at some point. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him to make it happen, right? I feel like it's just as much pressure as some kid getting a pro circuit ride, because it seemed like if you couldn't do it on pro circuit, then like almost nobody wanted you because you had the top. And now, do you get the philosophy that I'm kind of going with?
Yeah.
100%. Well, I think the hard part for us to understand without looking at contracts is timelines, because as Trevor said, I don't think there's any satellite team that would want to hold anybody back from an opportunity. But then on the flip side of that, if you're somebody that's, let's just say Brandon, that owns Club MX, they've got to go sell gear deals, and they got to sell every deal that they do, every single sponsor that we see on the jersey and on the truck. You can only sell that based on who's on your team. So now that puts Brandon in a really, really tough situation, because he's made a promise to other manufacturers, and now he has to go back and tell those manufacturers that he's not there. You see the double smack upside the head to Brandon. He's lost somebody that he's invested a lot in, but I don't think any satellite team owner would dispute the idea that they know that potential is there. You build somebody up and then they get poached by a factory team. But the idea for a team to be able to get bigger budgets, the only way you can sell it is who's your rider or riders in that case. Think about the predicament when Ricky Carmichael and Kerry Hart had their team together. You had Kenny Watson out there doing a phenomenal job. He had between the three of them, they had tremendous amount of contacts. Look at the sponsors that Kenny Watson brought to the table: Jimmy John's, Dodge, the casino, obviously Suzuki, right? That came from Ricky's contacts. But how difficult must it have been? Because how do you promise Kenny $1 million, $2 million a year salary plus the bonuses without the commitment from the sponsors? But you can't get the sponsors without telling them who do you have a commitment from on the rider side. So once again, Ricky and Kerry probably had to write some pretty big checks of their own to make Kenny feel confident enough to say, hey, come join our team. And then once he got him on there, then Kenny went out and had to sell. And I can't imagine how difficult that was. And then, of course, then you get the TV games where Jimmy John's, right? He's spending a tremendous amount of money to be on the RCH team. And what does the TV do? The TV zooms in and makes sure that it only shows his face. It doesn't show the jersey, because Jimmy John's is not a sponsor of the series. So what does Jimmy John's do? They pull their sponsorship. And then they tell RCH that they can't have a Dodge on the property because it's a Toyota Supercross. So what do? Kenny Watson, being as smart as he is, he goes and gets a Dodge car, puts it on the rear gate lift and lifts it off the ground 3 inches and says it's not on property. Well, they didn't like that. They didn't think Kenny's sense of humor was very good. So guess what? They tell Dodge they can't have a car on the property. So what does Dodge do? Dodge pulls from the team. And where's RCH today? All because the series found a way to completely undermine any financial funding that a team was able to get. And let's face it, Ken Roczen, Ricky Carmichael, and Kerry Hart. And you couldn't make that team stay afloat? Come on,
See,
man.
that's what's sad is, like, I know a lot of people are pissed at Enzo, but you have multiple scenarios where it's like, guys, why are we mad at a rider when this has been going on in the behind the scenes, like all along? Like, Coach, you and I know the owner of the whole Geico Honda stuff and how that went down, right? It's the same scenario. Geico Honda folded because Geico decided to, hey, why sponsor a shroud when we could have on every broadcast during halftime or something? So they decided to go underneath Geico Honda and then say, hey, do you want to pay us the same amount of money? We'll give you more exposure. And then what do? As opposed to being honorable for the team, they're all about a bottom line. So that's just business 101. And so truthfully, Enzo is just doing his due diligence as kind of being a businessman, because there's a short window when your stock is hot in this sport and people want to belittle other people by not holding up their word or not being as honorable of something. And, you know, my whole philosophy as an adult, like, yeah, that is not okay, right? You shouldn't do that. You sign with somebody, you should be respect for that. but you're kind of putting your future on the line, especially when you're going to war every weekend. So at the end of the day, I'm like, if he didn't take this deal with Star, this is something that he would regret probably for the rest of his life. So
Exactly.
I'm happy for him taking it, even if he pissed off a bunch of people.
I think you've got to go back. And as we said earlier, there's no way for us to know what the contract stipulated. You know, if you don't get another offer from another team by this date, then you're locked in. There's, like you say, there's so many nuances associated with the contract. I think all of us have grown up in an environment, as your dad said, you're only as good as your signature, right? The handshake and the look in the eyes. This could go obviously one of two different directions. If Enzo continues to do well and becomes more of a desirable asset, we won't ever bring this up again. It'll be a moot point. If he shits the bed and is a bad buy for Star, then he will have burnt the bridge, and this will be used against him when it comes to any future negotiations. So quite quickly, it's given Enzo a tremendous opportunity, but it's also going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on him. And I can't say that I agree with his decision to move because I don't know what the contract said. If he knew that the contract at that point had gone past a certain date, well, then you have to lock into what you committed to. And if that means that you make less money, I know that sucks, right? Hindsight's 2020, only because I think about the team owner trying to be able to go out and up the ante from existing sponsors and find new sponsors. And then on the flip side of that, the best for the rider, like you say, if you've got an opportunity, go for it. And I think we get into that finite line of when was what are the deadlines? Was a decision made before that deadline was over? If so, nothing that was void of the contract. We'll never know unless we could get Lucas or some agent that could elaborate how do these contracts work. Obviously, they're not going to give us private information about somebody's contract, but I hope for Enzo's standpoint.
See, that's silly too, because like in NFL and all those contracts are, I believe they're open, right,
Yeah.
Trevor? Like everyone knows that stuff. Sorry, Coach, I interrupted you, but is that inaccurate that everyone
in the
that's
NFL,
like public knowledge?
I don't pay attention to the NFL, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it is public knowledge as to like what their actual deals are.
Well, and that's
wrong.
what Boop knows said in the chat room. That's where a riders union, I think, would make a big difference. Because I don't know either, Johnny. I don't follow football at all, but we do know that those riders.
Damn soccer.
Yeah, there you go. We do know that the representation of those different Major League Baseball, football, soccer, hockey, and all that goes with it. We know once they got a collective voice, then everything. Think about it. There's a salary caps. Can you imagine our sport actually talking about the idea that all the riders are making too much money that we have to actually cap it? What an incredible problem we would have, right? And as the old saying goes, the only reason why unions ever got started was because if you go back to the automobile days, a union was started because the manufacturer took advantage of the person. So they got a collective voice, and now the unions call the shots, whether that's football, baseball, soccer, or whatever. And that's why you see so much resistance against it here in our sport. You can absolutely bet that the promoters would be very unsupportive of a riders union. I can promise you that. And there's a couple ways that you could do it, but that's another conversation.
Trevor, before I insert foot into mouth, because everyone on the internet seems to think that like I'm a hardcore liberal because I bring up certain issues that I feel can be fixed. Like I'm indifferent on the whole deal as far as like sort of in the middle of the road when it comes to my views on definitely government oversight. Like I want government to stay the F out of my way. I want taxes to be lower, but then at the same time, like I want healthcare to go public because it's going to breed competition, but then I also want it to be affordable, and then I like renewable energy, and I kind of like the idea of a riders union to kind of help level up the sport here. So your take on what Coach was saying.
Yeah. Well, politically speaking, I'm libertarian, so I kind of agree with you fully on that. I don't really care what people do as long as it's good for them and it's not hurting anybody else. So I don't know if a riders union, it's obviously never going to happen. I don't think a riders union can ever happen because Feld and MX Sports, they've got their gains and they're not going to let them get a hand on that. But I think they should loosen the regulations on like the sponsorship thing you're talking about with Dodge. That sucks. Why do that to a team? You want more money in the sport. You're literally attacking a team. Now that team's gone. So they just need to loosen the regulations on that. If they can allow for teams to do unique things like RCH did with Dodge, maybe these riders can get paid more, and maybe there wouldn't be as much talk as about a riders union, and they can stand on even ground. I just don't think there's ever gonna be a riders union though.
Yeah, usually when people are happy, they don't really go for trying to unionize anything. They're I mean, that's a good point. And truthfully, with how much more money, like I know a couple privateers that it made their entire year by just finishing the last 3 rounds of super motocross. And so that was huge for them. And so they don't want that to go away. And that's a good start.
Have you heard of Ryan Hughes' perspective on that? The pay thing for super motocross?
What did he say?
He said, instead of dumping all that money into 3 rounds, why couldn't they have just dumped it into pro motocross, as they're lacking compared to supercross? Because in the end, the riders are racing more races it could have been the same money if they would just have implemented that into pro motocross, and it would have been easier for us to send guys to Motocross of Nations possibly. It'd be easier on that end too, so we're not fighting with in front.
I got an answer for that. Unless, Coach, you want to...
Oh, go for it, brother.
Sure. My answer is it's business. It's marketing. How do you make something more exciting? You want to have an influx, like a center point, a Las Vegas for a bunch of people to want to watch. If you want more people sitting down watching the race, and the likelihood of people watching 12 rounds of motocross is less likely than having all these commercials for the one big hitter. It's the scarcity principle. And so I think that is just a complete marketing strategy. And I kind of agree with it. Like that's how it's going to get to work. But no,
now, is there any way you can find out the attendance for rounds? Is there any way you could find the attendance? How many people were there?
What's funny is
that's very funny. Yep. Go ahead, Johnny. I know exactly where you're going with it. I agree.
I mean, it should be a public knowledge. It should.
Yeah.
I know I was leaked some information on the Supercross numbers for the TVs. And honestly, us as YouTubers have a comparable number of views compared to the people that watch the races live on TV. And so really? I think the reason why they and even on those pages really say confidentiality, like you can't share this. So I'm saying allegedly is what I'm saying here, but it should be a public record. And I think we would all be dumbfounded, truthfully, and not trying to be negative about it, but just something needs to change to get more viewers. And that's exactly what they did, is they created these extra rounds at the riders' expense. Like Rhino is full blown for the riders. That is a marvelous idea for the riders to have them pay more, go to more of the motocross rounds. But as far as for sponsors, because that's who pays the bills and the fans, they decided to put riders down at the bottom yet again and put them up front, which is why that whole riders union would be helpful. So
just out of curiosity, have we seen a 24 race schedule? Does the SMX come back? Has the whole schedule been announced?
I don't see that it's been announced yet. I mean, I can do a quick Google search. It just ended. And like,
here's the reason why I think it's awfully interesting is MXGP announced their schedule, right? So if there was going to be a 100%, there's no doubt in our mind, this is we are invested in the growth of the sport. We've brought all this money. I think we are all kind of beat to death with hearing how much money is the influx of money that was added to the series this year. It was very clear the promoters wanted to show we just miraculously came up with money. We got a little bit of money from NBC, and we are such good people. We went ahead and dumped a couple more $1 million in, and we all want to toast some wine glasses, and we want to be outside the Coliseum, and we're just all singing Kumbaya together. And we want the average listener, the viewer, the fan to seriously believe that this is what the sport really asks for. They think we're that dumb because we heard it all year long, just how much money is there. Well, is this something that we're going to see for another 25 years, or is this something that we're going to see until they feel comfortable that either World Supercross folds?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
Do they wait until they see that World Supercross doesn't have as much of an impact? Because we've heard from If you listen to Astafin on Gypsy Tales, he was very clear about how the contract negotiations were very convoluted because the OEMs didn't want Kenny going, or not OEMs, but Honda did not want Kenny doing World Supercross, right? So is the money just going to kind of linger until the threat of competition is going to dry up and go away? And then all of a sudden we'll start to see that money miraculously start to evaporate as quickly as it arose, as it showed up? Because that's the thing for me. Go ahead, Johnny.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're
I just
good,
wanted
brother.
to answer your question here. So you've got the Super Motocross finals on the top here, and then here's the schedule, and you got all the rounds for Supercross. That is Salt Lake City finale, and you got the Pro Motocross.
Aren't they just to be announced?
Yeah, they're to be announced. So they're,
yeah.
I guess it's up in the air, right?
So that's my first question. You have so many people that went out and badmouth World Supercross because they lost an investor, they got a new investor, they reshuffled the race schedule. And people are like, oh, see, they're just disorganized. Well, if this is so well established, why is it not rolling out with a rubber stamp saying, man, we are here, we're committed? Because MXGP's already got theirs out, right? And there's a heck of a lot more to negotiate when you're going from literally continent to continent for races. And if this is so stamped in steel, why don't we already have an established schedule? Why are we not already hearing, all right, here's the funding? Johnny, you probably heard in the triathlon side, Ironman finally realized they're getting their thunder stole from them by PTO. So what'd they do? They just announced a new Ironman series. They ironically just found 1.5 million for the pros at the end of next year. As you say, Johnny, every single show, tides rise all ships, right? So because World Supercross came in, all of a sudden there was a threat. We now find this so-called NBC money and some of this additional money. Do you find it interesting? You've got the DMG group, the Daytona Motorsports Group that owns AMA. Do you not find it interesting that these extra races were owned by DMG Group, with the exception of the Coliseum? Do you not find it ironic that we didn't go to the Atlanta Superdome? Instead, we went to a NASCAR venue for Atlanta, which is historically one of the biggest Supercross draws of the year. You start connecting some dots and you can't help but go, is there something underneath brewing that we're not able to, know it? Obviously, they're not going to come straight out until it becomes an issue. It's just like the whole debacle with Geico. Yes, it literally dissolved a team. And I say this all the time. Would you rather have a little bit of something or 100% of nothing? Geico got left with Ziggy over at Factory Connection, and his investors got left with nothing because essentially the money was poached from the team.
Yeah.
But if you talk about it, then you're jaded and you have a bad attitude versus just talking about it like two gentlemen across the table with a cold beer saying, where did the money go? Because I've asked this question on this show before. Where's Makita's money? Where's San Manuel Yamaha? Where are all those monies that we used to see wrapped around Ricky Carmichael on Suzuki? Where did we see the money that was wrapped around James Stewart? Where did it go? Where did Cycle Trader go that was sponsoring JGR? We know why Cycle Trader pulled out. They had no representation on the track, which is another easy to fix problem that I still can't understand. And when you hear that Home Depot, because as you guys know, Joe Gibbs racing one of his cars is Home Depot, JGR offered the motocross team to Home Depot and they declined. What does that tell you about how attractive that our sport is to that level of a sponsor? You can have the team for free. How cool would it have been to see a Home Depot motorcycle out there? And they said, thank you, but no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that NASCAR does really good compared to motocross. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with NASCAR, if you watch it a lot, but they have the camera on almost every car at some point, for the most part, like top 30 guys. They focus on them and talk about them at some point, and they get paid based upon their camera time, and it's plastered all over the car, so it's great for the sponsor. But in motocross, we don't have that. They show
the stuff is, you make an interesting point, Trevor, because I was almost thinking, like, last year World Supercross tried to have the live helmet cam footage, but it was actually on the fender, and it was kind of shaky, but the idea was there. It's 2024. You should be able to invest in something like that and have it on at least every team that's there. Maybe not the privateer guys, because it'd be hard to have them do that. They'd probably have to buy their own camera. But my
But
point.
help me understand this though, Johnny. They say that we can't put GoPros on the bikes because of safety. Like I know why they took it off the helmet, right? Because they're afraid of it going piercing right through the helmet. That's why they don't allow helmet cams anymore.
I thought it was the leverage on your
No,
neck.
Yeah,
their concern is, well, I've heard both sides. What I've heard is if you were to go straight on top of your head and you landed on top of that, it would almost be like a nail through the helmet. It would just pierce it like an eggshell, which makes sense, right? So then they're like, all right, let's wear it on the chest, right? My point is they took GoPro off of the riders, but yet they put the GoPro on the KTM little riders, the KTM, whatever the hell they call that.
The juniors.
The KTM junior race. Can somebody please explain that to me? We can't get it on the night show somewhere on the bike, but we can put it on a bunch of little KTM guys. And I understand velocity and speed and all of that, but I don't quite understand. You
should be able to mount it on, like a foot peg can impale you, right?
Sure.
Your brake lever could theoretically impale you. Your clutch and front brake could impale. There's so much dangerous stuff on the bike. Just put it in the front number plate or something. You can make cameras small enough to where they could do that. But my point is have it on all the factory guys. And whenever you switch by pressing the button on the lower right-hand corner, just like this damn thing freaking says Zoom, because I got to pay $500 more because my professional subscription isn't enough to get rid of the damn logo. I got to pay an extra $500 to do it. But my point is you could have Club MX in that corner. You could have Star Yamaha. You could have something. So every time they go to that rider and they use that footage, there's a small little logo for him, for the team to help take care of that whole scenario. I think that would be great. And truthfully, like I said this when I was talking to Jace, is like, honestly, it seems like the privateer needs to die in order for the sport to evolve. Is you need to have the works level, almost like the MXGP unobtainium stuff right at the top. And then you could have a stock class or the electronic class or something for the privateers. Let the new wave of e-bikes coming from the privateers to go by and race that stuff, almost like the futures are doing. But then you have the top guys, and then you're able to know, like, okay, if you want to show up at these races, everyone has to have these cameras equipped and blah, blah, blah. And that's just only something that the resources from a major factory team would be able to check mark off that stuff. I think it's too hard to try to have the privateers do stuff. That's why, like, when I've talked to the powers that be, I'm not going to name names, right? Because I always get in trouble whenever I name names. I get a message afterwards, is why can't we do group healthcare? Why can't you do it? Well, the answer I've gotten is, well, we don't know the consistency. We need to know that, hey, all 40 riders are going to be at all the rounds, all 33 rounds. Like, that's the only way we could do a policy. But when you have 100 guys enter and you really only have maybe 20 guys that go to all of them, there's a problem there, is when it comes to a premium or some sort of a policy. But big corporations, Apple, all of them are able to have some sort of group business policy for health insurance. Like, yeah, so what? You probably have a $10,000 deductible. Like, that's what you would need to do in a sport like this. But still, offering something like that would be incredibly advantageous. And I'm going to stop talking because that was very long-winded.
I did want to hit on something you commented about. You said how MXGP has like unobtainable parts and the top teams have really modded out bikes and stuff. But isn't it ironic that there are more private teams and privateers higher in the rankings in MXGP than they are here? Like, I know
Totally
Jan
agree.
Panzer. You know Jan Panzer? Have you heard of him?
I have.
He's a privateer, full privateer MX2 rider, and he's running about 10th to 15th every weekend against all these factory teams. And then you have like Alberto Ferrato on a privateer, not full privateer, but a privateer team, almost getting a podium at the final round and winning the qualification race. You don't see that here. Why is that?
You answer that for me, Trevor, because you've thought about it like that. It doesn't compute, right? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't add up.
Well, like even at MXGP, right? You've got the privateer, I believe, KTMs that are being the Yamaha teams, the Honda teams. Like, these are the privateers at the elite level where guys are spending tens of millions of dollars for these prototype bikes. but yet you've got one manufacturer that has second tier stuff for privateers that are beating these full blown factory things. Like that doesn't make sense either. So,
well, here's something that I would be very interested in. Johnny, you mentioned the idea of having healthcare be affordable for everybody. And then you get into that. Let's have a roundtable conversation with an attorney, a doctor, somebody from the hospital, and someone from the insurance company. And everybody kind of push aside their self-serving agenda and go, why is a Tylenol $32 in the hospital? You'll have the hospital that'll say, well, they have to offset the money that people come in and don't pay. You have the insurance company, right? Everybody's going to start pointing fingers at the other person as to why healthcare is expensive. Take that same roundtable dialogue. I have never been into Formula One, just never been my thing, right? Until they did the Netflix show. Now I'm watching Tyler Hamilton or watching Hamilton out there, and I'm watching the Ferrari guys, and you watch how the teams, they literally will bring a driver in based on the amount of money he's able to bring in, contacts that he may have. I've talked to Jeff Ward about this when he went to Indianapolis 500, right? He can get an opportunity. One of the team owners would give him an opportunity, but he has to bring a certain amount of money to the table to get that car on the track. My point in this is I was blown away. Have you seen the Formula One race venue at Abu Dhabi?
Sorry, say that again. I'm reading the chat.
Yeah, Trevor, did you say you have or have not?
I don't watch Formula One, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I wait till, honestly, I'm the guy that I like the drama. I wait till the Netflix series comes out. So I honestly, I don't even watch the races because I don't want to be swayed or know what happens at the end of the movie.
But stop and think about this, Johnny. The venue that was built in Abu Dhabi, right? Out in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to guess, somebody Google it. How much did they pay to build that F1 facility? Because it's exactly that. It's a facility in the middle of the desert.
Oh, it's got to be like $1 billion.
Johnny, the place is so extravagant. They actually held a triathlon there. One of the top end PTO races was at Abu Dhabi. The exact same, the bike portion was on the race course. Here's where I'm going. Cool. Here's where I'm going with this. If you watch the Netflix, right? You've got Ferrari. They've got their principal owner. You've got all these sponsors that are on the car. They've got this crew chief or this crew team that seems like there's 25, 30 people. They've got all their technical people. And if I don't say this correctly, for the sake of the listeners, please clear me up. You and I want to start a team. So we have to go get a manufacturer. We have to get enough sponsors to be able to afford to put together a team, a rider, a driver, and everything that goes. Why would anybody want to invest in that? Oh, that's because we have a certain amount of venues that we get to go to. Well, wait a second. Why would all of those investors build a multi-billion-dollar facility? Oh, that's because the Formula One race series is so lucrative, attractive, great for entertainment, good for business. It's just like golf, right? Why do people pay to go to Augusta? Well, this golf tournament's brought to you by Google. And then Google's going to go and rent 25, 30 homes in Augusta. They're going to pay a ridiculous amount of money. And what do? They start using it for entertainment. And you look at that trickle down effect, or do you want to look at it as the dominoes following up? How can the PGA offer so much money for prize money? And that one particular club is raising that money. And that's because they can entertain. And do you see where I'm going with this? We're mesmerized. None of us watch Formula One, but we've seen it on Netflix. And if you watch it from the inside out, somebody has to say to themselves, you know what would be a very good investment? Let's invest in that Ferrari team. And then in investing in that Ferrari team is going to go racing at these venues. And these venues are part of a bigger series. Do you see where the snowball of money just starts steamrolling? Because now, can you imagine what the promoters of Formula One, what would it cost you? What would it cost the three of us? We own a big facility. What would it cost for us to be on the Formula One circuit? I have no idea what the dollar amounts are. I'd love to get somebody who's been part of that because Formula One obviously has grown quite a bit. Trevor, do you follow NASCAR a lot? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I watch NASCAR pretty much every weekend.
So because I've only seen what I've heard on the news, NASCAR is not quite as big as it used to be back like in the Dale Earnhardt days, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. Is that right or wrong?
Shift. Yeah, it was biggest around the Jeff Gordon Earnhardt era, around when he died. And then it's kind of been a plummet ever since then. But during COVID, other than like motocross, NASCAR was kind of the only sport on TV during COVID, and it blew up during that time. And now the stands are full again. They were tearing down stands in 2018. Now the stands are full and they're expanding again. There was a huge flip on that. They even went to the LA Coliseum this year and raced on a tiny track, but managed to have a lot of people in the stands, and it was successful. So I don't know, it's growing again.
Trevor, what brings your attention to seeing people do 200 plus miles an hour turning left for hours on end?
Now,
like
a lot of people make fun of it like that. Like they say, oh, it's just them turning left, but there's a lot involved into it. You have to plan out, okay, if I start on the inside, I can get up front earlier, but I'm going to lose momentum. If I get my tires changed at this time, I'll have more traction. But if I stay out longer, I'll be in the lead. I'll have the advantage. But you got to weigh out all the problems, where you're going to go. If you follow more people, you have more momentum due to the slipstream. It's not just turning left. There's a lot into it.
Yeah. Forgive my arrogance. I didn't mean to sound like a dickhead there. It just comes out, right? Maybe if my tone was a little bit different.
No, I'm not mad at you. That's just what everyone says. I've heard it a million times. Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I bring it up is I didn't grow up in a NASCAR family at all, but when Gordon, the DuPont car, that was the time it started becoming exposed to me. And then you have Dale Earnhardt Jr. coming in, and then you had Danica Patrick. My point is, and we've talked about this on the show numerous times, is it was the Danica Patricks, it was the Jeff Gordons, it was the Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s, it was the personalities. That's all that's all Netflix is doing with the Formula One show, is they're bringing in the personalities, each one of the team owners. You get to see how much of an asshole they are. You get to see the politics behind the scenes as to, the rider's doing okay.
Oh yeah, it seems very liberal.
Yeah.
It's very.
Yeah. Well, and what I like about it, and I know, of course, like everything, it's made for TV, but when you start looking at, all right, who's going to get bumped from a spot for next year? Oh, well, this guy's got a couple contacts, or his dad's got some contacts. Well, we need the money, so we'll bring him in and we bump this other guy. We were just watching it the other night, and they ended up bringing some guy back that they had terminated the year before. And my point being is, we're not really focusing on how many pounds of air are in the tires, right? It's the people, it's their spouses, it's their partners, it's the relationship with the team owners to the sponsors back to the drivers. And you're just like, how can I still think we have such a dynamic sport. And we know why, because they don't want our racers to have a personality. I mean, my goodness, we have commentators that are still telling you that green bike is a Kawasaki, for peace sake. It just blows my mind. I'm just like, how many true people are tripping upon this race coverage that's on Peacock that you have to click on the sports button and then scroll over to Supercross?
It's so hard to find motocross.
Oh, but
trying
we
to
have
find,
to
I'm
say
like,
that
Supercross, Moto. What's going on? It's really hard to find.
I was actually surprised with Super Motocross. When I clicked the LA Coliseum round, I opened up the app and it was actually right on the front page. I was like, that is the first time I've ever seen that. They must be in cahoots on this one, man. Like, they're trying to promote this one hard.
Because a lot of Peacock spent a lot of money. They were like 60% of the lion's share stuff. So I'm sure they want to promote their own stuff. Like, it's not, it's the same thing when you search something, if you're not paying Google, you're not going to be up on top. That's why when you search something, you see sponsor. And half the time you click on it, and you're like, this wasn't what I freaking wanted. You got to go back out and find something else. But no, the chat is blowing up a lot about Beta and Triumph. Do you think these guys are going to get anywhere close to podium? Beta is going to have a 450 team. Triumph is only going to have a 250 team. So it's a little bit of I think Triumph is probably going to have a better shot at it, because I think the 450 teams are more invested and you just have better riders. So if I'm going to say something, I say Triumph has got a shot at getting a podium this year. Beta, I could see them. It'd be a win-win if they're just in the night show at every round of Supercross.
I'm just going to go based off from MXGP. With MXGP, sorry to interrupt you, Rob.
No, go, Trev.
MXGP, they have the same team for Beta, Liqui Moly Beta over there. And every rider who has switched like Ben Watson. Watson was on Yamaha, incredible rider. As soon as he got to Beta, he's been struggling a lot. Now, I'm not saying it's directly correlating with the Beta team, but Lapino was doing all right on KTM a couple years ago, switched to Beta. He's been struggling a lot. So maybe that bike isn't oriented towards motocross as good as they'd want it to be. I think Nichols and Bloss can kind of work on it this year. I don't think they're going to do as good, but I can definitely see Nichols in top 10, possibly top 5. Triumph is probably going to do good, though, because they obviously have the full sport behind them, kind of like Ricky Carmichael and everything involved. So, and Clement Desaulles, I think they'll do better.
I like the answer. Well said. Well said. Coach?
Yeah, I think if you look at the chassis on the Triumph, I think they're going to be further ahead than the Beta. To Trevor's point, I just don't think that they've got the riders in the 250 class to be on the podium. I just think that the 250 class right now is so stacked. Even it's hard. I mean, you could go and put Deegan on that Triumph and it would be hard pressed to get it up there just because of the established foundation of the gas, the Star, the PC bikes, the Honda bikes. Again, nothing against you. I mean, as we've seen over and over again, you've got to have the right combination. I mean, you're going to tell me that PC hasn't had the talent. Look at the beginning of the year. They had 6 very, very good riders. All 6 of those guys could have won. None of us would have been surprised if any of those 6 riders had come out and won, but they didn't because of what? The bike was a stink bug early in the year. I mean, we heard a lot of complaints. Joe didn't want to ride it. He got hurt. Seth got hurt on it. Then all of a sudden they found that magical piece that the commentator spoke a lot about this summer. And then the PC bike got closer and closer to the front. Joe started getting some wins and some momentum. My point being is, do you really think that all of that momentum is going to fall into place in the first year on a 250 platform against 5 established KTM, Gas, PC, Honda? I just don't see it happening.
No, it's definitely an uphill battle.
It will be
a giant boulder uphill.
Yeah.
Something goes wrong, it's going to go wrong quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, if anything, I don't know. You tell me, what do you guys think? Is Triumph doing something like JGR did, where, the first couple of years, they just kind of wanted to get all the kinks worked out, get the team, everybody's working with an ebb and flow, and then come in and invest with a James Stewart? Is that what Triumph does? One of the things I do find very interesting is that Anderson signed a 2-year deal with Cowie, which kind of was against it, what everybody had anticipated, because that means that he's not going to retire on Triumph. He's going to retire on Cowie. There's no way. So who's going to be the 450 rider?
wait, so you're saying that Jason Anderson, you think he's going to retire on a Cowie?
Yeah, he just signed a 2-year extension. I mean, how many more years do we think Jason really has left in him? We already saw.
How old is Jason?
I don't even think it's an
28?
age. I mean, think about it. I mean, with a decimated field, he couldn't go up there and shake it with the top guys. If you take Jed out of the equation, he wasn't up there second and third every weekend like we thought he would be. Yeah. So he got a 2-year extension with Cowie, which I thought was very interesting, because I had anticipated he'd signed a 1-year deal and then in 25 go to Triumph and maybe go there for 2 years with Bobby and then retire in 26. But I mean, right now, if you look at musical chairs, who's going to be available to go into that spot in 25? And we've heard some rumblings that Ferrandis might go over there, but then we heard he might end up over at HEP.
Watch it, Sexton, because he's got his 2-year deal with an option of a third.
Anything's possible, because I think a lot of times we forget how quickly people can get burnt out and want to be done. I mean, we heard Cooper Webb himself say that he was thinking about, if he couldn't get things with KTM figured out and he didn't get that Yamaha opportunity, he was pondering retirement. So the Anderson piece of the summer is one that I'm very, very, of all the contracts that just fell into place, his is the most dumbfounding to me, because if Factory Connection is definitely going to come back, if Ziggy's going to bring a team back, and we've heard some scuttlebutt that was going to possibly be Ferrandis as well. So now you've got Ferrandis at Triumph, Factory Connection, and over at HEP Suzuki, which how in the hell is HEP Suzuki going to afford Ferrandis and Roxon? Because Roxon's not taking a pay cut.
Well, it's probably just Progressive is affording Roxon, and then HEP Suzuki is affording Ferrandis.
What do you think they're getting Ferrandis for? I just can't imagine that he's going to take that much of a pay cut.
He's probably going to ask for as much as what he did at Star Yamaha, at least.
And that's why he didn't get re-signed at Yamaha, because it was too much. It's way beyond what his value is right now. And I hate to say it, I mean, you're only as good as your last race. And how do you look in the last
Well, I thought
couple
he
rounds?
said he was like even going to retire too. That was like the
Well,
whole
He was
plan
talking
of
about
this
that
year.
for a little bit. He said if he couldn't get a ride that was good, he's just going to retire because there's no point in going in on a half. I don't know if I can cuss half. You know what I mean? Team.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's no point,
fuck
just
it, man.
retire.
Say whatever you want to say.
Yeah. I'm just saying he pretty much said he doesn't want to go on a half-ass team. He's going to be on a factory team or just as good. Otherwise, he's going to retire. There's no point.
Yeah.
Well, in to Slayer's
Purcell,
point right
he
here,
that was the same thing with Purcell. I
Yep.
loved watching him ride, and him not showing up on the track was just kind of heartbreaking. Same thing with James Stewart. He said that if he couldn't get a factory ECU, there was no point in showing up and going. You know, like that's the whole thing that sucks about the state of this economy when it comes to bikes is we need more teams, which is awesome because that's exactly what we're getting. We're getting the Beta, we're getting the Triumph. You've got the Hemp Suzuki, and then we're probably going to get an influx of potentially Suron and maybe Stark and some sort of that eventually. And you brought it up, Trevor, as far as the NASCAR growth during COVID. Well, NASCAR wasn't the only thing that grew during COVID. Interest rates were really low. People thought that they could go spend a bunch of money. They bought every motorcycle off the showroom. So everyone wants to go out there and they want to be the new Ken Roczen.
It's
Like
me.
Yeah, no, exactly,
Yeah,
dude.
I bought a new bike during that time period. Yeah.
Good for you. Do you mind sharing what bike it was?
What was your point with the COVID thing?
My point is that there is an
22
influx of
factory
money
Honda. I was going to get
coming to the sport.
Yeah.
It's trickling in a faucet. We just haven't really seen it. It wasn't just all at once, but it is happening. And
well, the one thing that I would be curious about in the chat rooms talking about it here, is it just me or we're sitting here talking about a satellite team in the chat room here? They're saying that Ferrandis will get anywhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million. I'm not going to say that I trust or don't trust those numbers, but we're sitting here saying that our satellite team is on struggle bus and let's just say that they pay Ferrandis 500 grand and let's say Roxon's getting paid 1.5. A satellite team with a $2 million salary. I don't care if Progressive's paying for it. I don't care if it's Twisted Tea or if it's Monster. We say that there's no money floating around, and yet we're talking about a B team. And I love what HEP is doing with the Suzuki program, right? I know that they've been courted to go to a couple different colors and all that, but stop and think about that. That's like back in the day saying the Subway Honda team has got a $2 million salary with two guys. I don't know. I just sometimes I listen to some of the numbers that are getting bounced around and I'm just like, wow, they're saying that there's no money to be had, but leaving an OEM factory team and getting paid $500,000 on a satellite team, that doesn't seem like bad money. Thank you for
no,
the
not at all. Not at all. I know buddy Steve-O over there at Pulp MX, he's always said, which I agree with him, as far as the fact that the 1% of the 1% share 90% of all the money coming into stuff. And then you've got, like you said, smaller, big names that don't get paid that much, where they're lucky to be breaking six figures, which is crazy. But I think we're seeing a little bit of the change of the guard here where more riders, and honestly, I think it's Kenny. I think Kenny's the one that's kind of broken down the door that has shown, hey, you can go get outside sponsors and you can make it happen. Like, could you imagine if Kenny didn't bet on himself and either stayed with HRC Honda or he did end up going to Suzuki and we didn't see him get inside the top 10, which I was guilty. I was like, dude, there's no way. There is no way that this is going to work out. But it's ironic. He gets a big sponsor like Progressive, and not saying that, not taking anything away from Kenny. Absolutely. He's an amazing rider. He just has more freedom to do what he wants to do, but he still had the resources to make that bike comparable to what he was leaving.
Here's a question for you. Go ahead, Trevor.
So the factory connection rumor, is that, I've only heard a little bit about it. Is the rumor that Factory Connection is starting their own team or that they're going to work with HEP?
No, I've heard that Ziggy's thinking about bringing back the old Geico Honda team. is what he's
Okay,
thinking
because I
about
heard
doing.
somebody say that they were going to work with HEP, and my immediate response was that would be awful for the team, because the best part for Kenny, like in Supercross, he changed suspension companies and guys working on a suspension 3 or 4 times, I think. That's the advantage of him being on HEP. That's exactly what he needs. And I think for them to stick to one suspension company or something like that to kind of glue him down, that ruins the whole point of HEP being the free team, the freedom they need. So, but obviously that doesn't matter because that's not the rumor. Sorry.
No. The one thing that I was going to be curious about is
It's still a good point.
You have a 3-way insurance war going on. You've got Geico on the side of the Outdoor Nationals. You've got Flo in the Progressive ads during the show. And then you've got Progressive on Kenny. Have either of you changed your insurance this last year because of who they are or are not sponsoring?
No, it's basically who will give me the cheapest effing policy around. If it's Allstate, go for Allstate. If it's Progressive, going with Progressive. And truthfully, Progressive, with being as giant as they are, somebody hit my wife in my Corolla, and I'm going on a little tangent here, and it was a nightmare to get back. Even the automotive deal, they took my little Corolla for a test drive and all sorts of shit that I'm finding out on this damn car. It's a whole long scenario to where it was almost a point of me wanting to get far away from Progressive, because it was just a bad taste in my mouth. But no, I have not changed based on who they're sponsoring.
See, the reason why I'm curious is I spent quite a few years in the advertising world, especially with sponsorship and activation. And I'm still amazed, being in the sport for, since 78, I haven't received one thing from any of those companies or from the races going to the races where there's any level of activation associated with, hey, what would it take for them? I'll be very honest with you. I moved all of my insurance over to Geico when they started sponsoring the Factory Connection team. My boat's there, my motorcycle's there, both my cars are there. My point being is support the sport, right? I know it sounds a little cliche-ish, but Johnny, like when Bud Light used to sponsor the Hawaiian Ironman, I wasn't a beer drinker then. I would always buy Bud Light for my brother. He liked to drink beer, so I buy Bud Light. Support those that support the sport.
Bud Light, Yamaha, McGrath, man. I was like 6 years old and I'm sitting here trying to buy beer for my dad, it didn't work.
But my point is if we go back to why is Ferrari willing to invest in a team? Well, it's because they're part of a series that's part of these beautiful venues, which allows us to be able to go and entertain our top clients and all right, great. Then you come into, all right, we have Progressive, you have Geico, and you have Geico, Progressive. I can't remember the other one, doesn't matter. So you've got 3 insurance companies, right? But yet when we go to the races, I haven't seen anything that's gone out of its way to get me to convert over. So then all of a sudden we find out, hey, why isn't, like, if you look at Loretta Lynn's, they've had Aeronautique as a sponsor. They've had Lucas Oil, even the Outdoor Nationals. Look at the turnover of the title sponsor and the presenting sponsor. And I know somebody will say, oh, well, that's because of the ad agency, right? I used to hear this all the time. Well, the reason why Kawasaki is not sponsored by Chevy trucks anymore is because they have a new advertising director. Okay, well, why didn't that Chevy truck get replaced with Dodge? Or why didn't that get Ford or whatever it would be? You see the problem that I have with it? It's like we want the sport to grow, but then we don't really see a lot of activation. If I'm somebody who's looking at return on investment, I don't even know. I'm just astounded that, props on Astafin for being able to get $1 million for Kenny with Progressive. Because I don't get it.
I don't think the sports that we're paying attention to are they're trying to do like what we would do. Like if I had a sponsor approach me and they want me to use my special code and say, oh, use this for 25% off the product and say how good they are. I don't think the sports are in that business. In the advertiser's perspective, like in NASCAR, I'm going back to NASCAR. Sorry. Yeah. Kurt Busch was one of my favorite drivers forever. And because he was sponsored by Monster, whenever I would go to the store and I wanted the energy drink, it'd be Monster, just because I associate my favorite athlete, Monster. Same thing with motocross. I loved Muscan for a long time. Then I switched to that. Oh, Muscan sponsored by Red Bull. Guess I have to have Red Bull. So I think that's what they're looking at is, oh, I saw Kenny sponsored by Progressive. I got to help him out. So I don't think the companies are going to say, oh, we have to associate a code with this on TV or anything. I think they just assume that the fans are going to associate their favorite riders with their company and it'll benefit them.
But if I'm a promoter, I'm going to make sure that every sponsor can feel an impact on their bottom line, knowing that they're supporting our series. And I think that's the part that's missing is it's like, we sponsor quite a few riders. We own 4 race teams around the globe. We have a team in Australia, we have a team in the UK, and we have 2 race teams here in the States. And we have both an off-road and a motocross team. Well, when we look at putting our partners out there, I always look at it as my goal is to make sure that people are buying product because of the riders that we support they are literally brand ambassadors at the races, whether they win, lose, or draw. That's not what matters.
Trevor, the chat agrees with you on what you were, well, honestly, both of you guys with the Geico and the Monster stuff and the Red Bull.
And I think that's the part where I go back to Formula One or I go to PGA golf, and it's just like, and I don't even want to get into the argument, well, there's more people that golf than ride moto. Well, if you're going to use that situation, then why does F1 do so well when none of us own a Formula One race car? You can't, the ball's got to bounce on both sides of the court if you're going to use that as an explanation. It's because the PGA knows how to leverage a venue, and they do a great job to be able to entertain those sponsors' clients. I mean, look at the Olympics. I mean, my goodness, the amount of money that Coca-Cola spends to be the official, soda company of the Olympics every year. And what is it that they use it for? They go out and they put tons of incentives at the retail level. Hey, whoever sells the most 12 packs of Coca-Cola in this region, we're going to fly you and your family to the Olympics.
Trevor, how much is
constantly closing it?
Sorry, Rob. I know we're winding down here on the show here, but F1, they have their own package that I don't even remember how much it is. I looked at it once. It's upwards of $100. I know MotoGP is right around there too, if not a little bit more. NASCAR, is their package on Peacock as well, or is it somewhere else? Like it's a separate package to watch the races.
NASCAR is primarily on Fox, the generic channel, and MSNBC, I think, or NBC Sports, one of those. But they go back and forth between those channels. They're just on generic TV.
Okay, so it's so big it doesn't need to try to sell a subscription type deal.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, they've worked with Fox Sports for like 40 years or something. So they kind of stick with them. They've been with them forever. So they just kind of, our fans are older. They know we're associated with Fox. Stay on Fox.
Okay. So then my whole argument here is kind of moot point. So I guess I will divert the question. What do you guys think of Prado, the MX world champion coming over here to ride Supercross? Do you think that would ever happen for him to actually line up on the gate at Anaheim?
I think it's a bad idea for him. I don't know why. I mean, I understand the glory of coming to the United States like Vial did. It's awesome. But Prado has it. He has everything right now. He is the most consistent rider over there. It wasn't the dominant guy this year. He was just on the track, almost podium every weekend, only won a couple times. So he's got MXGP in his hands. Why would you want to risk it all to come here for Supercross? I don't understand that at all.
Well, he was an amazing 250 rider. And then the 450, I thought he was a little bit too small for it, but he's coming into his own. As a fan, I just want to see him race against the American guys more often. And Supercross is such a different type of riding. We consider Supercross and motocross almost like the same sport, but really it's so different. It is so different.
You have to consider MXGP completely different as well. Like Vial, every time I talked to him, he said he hated the American bike. It was so hard for him to learn this bike because they're completely different. But obviously he did pretty well at Motocross of Nations, and I guess he was on his American bike, so I don't know what changed there. Maybe just that he rode the track a lot. But Prado will have a big learning curve coming here. Different bike, different suspension and all that, and whole completely different tracks. It wouldn't be good. I wish he would just stay there and be the king of MXGP, if you know what I mean.
Okay, well, but then Hurlings is coming back too. So, and then
but Hurlings is awesome, fastest guy on the planet when he's not on the ground. So,
he kind of James Stewart's it a bunch. It would be cool to see Hurlings and Prado come over here and race it. And
motocross, I would
that's
like
why I
that.
hope the World Supercross stuff kind of takes off, because then you would get guys like Prado and Febra and Renault and racing over there, where it would just make that series that much more entertaining. Cause like that's the only thing World Supercross is missing. Besides some of the venues seem more like arena cross tracks. I'm interested to see what they're going to do at Dubai this year. But if they had more riders, I think that would be the perfect. So then these guys wouldn't have to come over here and live in America, but they could literally kind of have their MXGP bikes, but just with unobtainium supercross setup after a bunch of testing. That's really what I'm looking forward to. And that's why I'm really hoping for World Supercross to succeed. And Coach, you were going to say something.
No, if you look at Hurlings, he's made a tremendous living doing MXGPs, only have to race, 6 months out of the year. I think there's this worldwide ideology mindset that everything in America is bigger and better. And I just think it's interesting I know they're not exact parallels, but if you look at Vial coming over and bypassing, retaining his, defending his championship and all that goes with it, it wasn't like he came over and walked Supercross and made it look easy. So I think you almost have to watch. If I were Prado, I would look at both Hurling and go, okay, Hurling's done quite well. To Trevor's point, Prado's on the fast track to being that guy right now. And then you look at Vial, who didn't come over and make it easy. He didn't, I don't know how many DNFs he had, but hit the ground quite a bit. So I have to agree with Trev. I think just keep your reputation clean, avoid all the injuries, especially knowing that the bikes are going to be significantly different. But of course, that's easy for us to say as commentators, whatever we want to call ourselves, right? If that's the guy's dream and it's one of those bucket list things that he won't feel like he's achieved it all until, I don't think any of us would be disappointed to see him come over. If I was his manager, though, I'd say, why? Stay in one piece, continue to collect very, very big checks. Only have to, we talk so much about how our race season is so long, where theirs is very definitive, start, stop, off season, get a good boot camp, get a good build up, have a good season. You've got much longer career if you do it that route. But there's no doubt. And I do agree with you, Trev. Hurlings is just another JS7, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, Prado already turned down a huge opportunity because he liked the MXGP style. When he was coming up in MX2 and being dominant, I guess KTM offered him a deal in MotoGP back then. They said, there's a lot more money in this sport and you're a huge Spanish celebrity. We'd love to have you there. And he said, absolutely not. I grew up in motocross and the MXGP program is how I like it.
Wait, so they wanted to switch him over to
the MotoGP.
I mean, a lot of riders have been successful doing that. I haven't heard that, but no,
I think they said that are you familiar with the MXGP Behind the Gate series? I think they said that a couple of years or 3 years ago.
I think they do a good job with that. I haven't watched all of them, but no,
I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what happened because that was back when Cairoli and him, I think they went just for a stop in, ride the bike media type of day. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he was asked by KTM if he could switch to that. But my point was, he said how much he loved the MXGP schedule. It's completely opposite of America. America, you race almost the entire year, no breaks. Burnout was really quick. MXGP, you have October, November, December, January, February, and most of March off. And then you only have 2 races a month for the most part. So there's a lot more freedom. If you get hurt, there's a lot more time to rehabilitate. I think it's just a way better program. And if he's winning and making a lot of money,
and you're not super jet lagged because you've got time to travel over there and adjust. And
well, it would be interesting.
19 pounds spread out would be way better than 31 or whatever it was here right after.
Well, I think it's just the American culture, dude. I mean, you and I have talked off air as far as the grind, even the stupid YouTube stuff. It's it's got to happen all the freaking time. It's it's hard to keep up with. And that's why most of the books back there, and I can't even tell have a lot to do with working way too much, but then having, the whole ideology of very successful people is when they're feeling creative, they don't mind working 13 hours a day, but just as Coach would say, it's not sustainable. But here in America, we try to sustain that kind of stuff over a whole year-long period, which gives you a false ideology of how to get stuff done. You do that shit for 2-3 months, and then you go take a month off, and then eventually you got some juices back to where you're going to want to work that hard again. But over here in America, we just feel like you just got to bang your head against and keep going and going. And I think that's a problem with all the privateers and everything. We see all this stuff with even the factory riders and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh man, look at how hard they work. Look at how hard they work. The one thing that they're not doing is recovering. Look at Ken Roczen. He arguably, he raced more series than he ever has before, but yet he still raced less, but he made more money and did better because he was giving himself proper time to recover. Go race in America for a little bit, then move over to World Supercross, then do MX of Nations, and then back to SMX, not in that order, but he was bouncing around all over the place, the Red Bull series, but yet he had 2-3 weeks in between all this stuff where he might not have touched a bike. He was able to recover and he was performing quite a bit better. Nuts. Crazy, right? Crazy.
Quite
That's
the
why I think the
novel
MXGP
idea.
schedule is better.
100%.
Sorry, what was that?
No, I agree with you 100%. It's why the schedule is so much better. We talked about this at the very beginning of the year in January when we saw how quickly the Supercross field got decimated in both classes. I mean, we saw PC couldn't even get a team started, right? And then you get the pace of the every weekend, go, 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 go. Then we saw a field that's decimated. Then you have people like us that talk about there's not much there's not a lot of fun watching 3 factory guys, but then we thought it was really cool. It gave privateers an opportunity to debut a lot of their skills. And then we said, hey, if you're a privateer, this is your best chance to make a point. This is your chance to leverage. Hey, people say that privateers don't matter. Well, what if none of the privateers lined up and there's 4 bikes? And my point is the conversation just keeps going like this, right? Long season, lots of attrition. Hey, you finally have a little bit of clout. And what are we talking about here at the close of this show? Just the whole idea that nobody wants to see a field get decimated. We'd love to see, we know you got to be in it to win it. That's one of the things that I do like about the GNCC series. I work with Mike Witowski with Phoenix Honda, and it's great because you race on Sunday, take 3 days of rest to Wednesday, train Wednesday to Wednesday, do a 3-day taper and repeat that pretty much all summer long. And then we get a couple month break during the middle of the summer because it's too hot. But to your point, Trev, when these guys get a chance to get a break and look at the longevity of their career, even though Hurling's been hurt quite a bit, think about it. What was his extension with KTM? 2 years or 3 years? That last contract he did. Yeah. So how many American riders do we see getting a 3-year contract? There's some scuttlebutt that
Hurling's has such a name. He's got the name that nobody else has. He's the pinnacle of the sport. You can't turn him down on a deal. He's going to get one no matter what.
But think about the longevity that, he may not get all of the achievements that we thought he was going to be capable of because of the injuries and the downtime, which is a shame. But why is he able to keep coming back? Because he's not that beaten and battered down in the first place. It would be fun to kind of start looking at the statistics. How many riders start the season in American motocross? 250, 450. Like, let's not do 250.
Supercross, yeah.
Let's just say 450, right? How many riders start in January and can get all the way to the end of the season? And then how many riders start MXGP and can get all the way to the end of the season? And then you tell me what series makes more sense.
Because that's a good point. I wanted to ask people about this because it's something I think about a lot. Supercross, in my opinion, is way overrated. I don't love Supercross because the tracks are all almost the same. You can't really make a different track after 100 times of doing Supercross in the same bowl. And they have more rounds, which annoys me. And it's way more dangerous, in my opinion, because look at the jumps in a tiny area and everyone's riding over their head because it's a shorter racetrack and shorter race. So in my opinion, I think if it was my perfect season of motocross and supercross, I wish they would do more motocross rounds than supercross because there's a lot different motocross tracks. And I just think motocross is safer in general than supercross. So I wish they would do that, but that's just a
out there.
Rant.
2 hours on a supercross track. Would it be scarier or safer?
2 hours?
Yeah.
On supercross? That'd be
on
bad.
Would it be safer or sketchier?
I think it'd be sketchier.
Would there be more injuries though? Would riders have to slow down to go fast?
I think there would be a lot more injuries. If you race longer on supercross, they already have more injuries in supercross. I think it would be more if you added more time.
It would be more. Okay. Coach? I mean, it's so loaded. I'm like, I'm kind of indifferent about the whole thing. I think initially there would be more injuries because the track is just going to deteriorate so much. You'd have to take out like qualifying or something in order to do it, but it might to where riders would have to, honestly, that's kind of bad because you'd have to have a pit stop and then somebody's going to run out of gas and they're going to end up. But
and you would also have to restructure the compensation. You know what I mean? Because if you start going to that kind of a length of a race, now the cost goes up. And then how many people can, I mean, we're already hearing people saying that they can't afford to go racing as it is. And in all fairness, I just couldn't imagine being a pro right now. And you have, what is it? 2 8-minute time sessions to try to get your gate pick. You know what I mean? 8 minutes. Think about that. You ruck up to a brand new track.
I think
and
it's
in
15, but
okay.
it's like 5 minutes free and then like 10 minutes timed.
And is there 1 or 2 of those, right?
There's 2.
All right. So you have 30 minutes to not only figure out a track, but to be as fast as you can possibly be, and then turn around and then you've got your night show, right? So you've got what is that, 5, 6, 7 laps. And then you've got a 20-minute main event. And then you got to start over next week with a blank sheet of paper with a new track, new direction, new airport, new everything. And you stop and you think about that. It's what these guys do on a weekly basis is absolutely insane. Plus trying to train during the week and all that goes with it. I still have to laugh out loud when I listen to these promoters talk about the idea that this has been a industry vision to see these two come together. And I'm like, you cannot sell that idea to the average viewer or just to a diehard fan.
Trevor,
there is no way.
I do agree with you that there is less injuries over in MXGP. And Coach, you were alluding to this too. You got more time to recover, etc. But like what happened at Grant Harlan at MX of Nations, like you've got a language barrier, and then sometimes you're in countries that don't have the proper health care. Like to me, that almost seems scary. Where at least here in America, you're getting top shelf, very expensive health care. As much as I try to sometimes say that, I will give it that the trackside support, Alpine Star medical units, they've done a good job in both motocross and supercross with red flags and making sure guys are okay this last year, as opposed to some other stuff. They're definitely trying to be better about stuff. But I mean, does that change your view at all? That
what, Harlan and like the safety? Well,
it just as far as MXGP, like, is it worth?
Yeah. In general, I don't think the hospitals are that much different over there. Like, I think Harlan's biggest problem was the language barrier. That sucks for him. I haven't spoken to him about it yet, but I heard about the whole thing. That sucks. I think in general, most of the countries they go to, you're fine. But like Indonesia, I think it's uncalled for going there. Like, you really think there's that much? I know they're making most of their money from the government. That's what I heard. The reason they're going to Indonesia is because the government funds like 33% of their yearly cost or something because they go there. But it's stupid because it's dangerous. A lot of guys got sick this year. I mean, you know the whole deal with Prado a week after that Indonesian GP. I think that's bad for the sport. But in general, MXGP goes to countries. I don't think there's going to be a safety problem in hospitals.
Okay. No, fair. We've been going for an hour and a half here now. So that's a good stopping point here. And Trevor, I know I've tried to get you on the show a couple times, but schedules just didn't align. Dude, you're more than welcome. You were more than welcome to come back on this show. I think you're very knowledgeable. You know what you're talking about. You do a good job with your content. And everybody here, I know there's been 1,100 of you guys that have watched the show. Make sure you go and subscribe. The Motocross Network is in the link down below. And also Coach Robb, his link is in there too. Support these guys. Support the community, because as we like to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Amen. So Trevor, is there anything you'd like to say since you are our guest on MX Unfiltered episode Trace?
I got nothing much to say. I mean, I'm glad to come on. I enjoyed it. I would love to come on again. And if you want to see my stuff, go to the mxnetwork.com, read the news, go to my YouTube channel and watch the news. I'm working on some good projects. I got a magazine and I got a documentary coming out soon. I'm not going to tell you who it's on, but it's going to be a good one.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Trevor, can you brop with us?
Sure.
All right, drop the hammer, bro.
friend. That's a little excessive. That's too much for me. I'm embarrassed.
Okay.